The ride to Uncle Silas's farm had taken Boone Carter 3 days through dusty trails and endless prairie. He'd expected a simple inheritance, maybe some cattle, definitely the old cabin, and enough land to start fresh after losing everything in the drought back east. What he found instead made him question whether the sun had fried his brain during the long journey. 3 women in wedding dresses stood in perfect formation near the wooden porch, each one standing nearly 7 feet tall with imposing muscular frames. Their powerful builds cast long shadows across the yard, despite the noon sun burning overhead. The sight should have sent him running, but something about their calm confidence held him in place. "You're late," said the middle sister, her dark skin gleaming with perspiration. "We expected you yesterday." She stepped forward, and Boone had to crane his neck back just to meet her eyes. "I'm Cora. These are my sisters, Hattie and Bertie." Hattie, the one with brown hair pulled into a tight bun, nodded politely. "Uncle Silas said you were reliable. We hoped that meant punctual, too." Boone's throat felt dry as desert sand. "How did you know when I was coming?" "I didn't send word to anyone." Bertie, the blonde one, finally spoke. Her voice carried a strange sadness that didn't match her wedding attire. "He told us about your farm burning, about the debts, about how you'd have nowhere else to go." She paused, studying his weather-beaten face. "He knew you'd come here eventually." "That's impossible," Boone said, dismounting his horse with shaking legs. "Uncle Silas died 3 months ago. My farm burned 2 weeks ago." The sisters exchanged glances that lasted just long enough to make Boone's skin crawl. Cora reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "This is his will. Read it yourself." Boone's hands trembled as he unfolded the document. The writing was definitely his uncle's careful script, but the date at the top made his blood freeze. The will was dated just 1 week ago, long after Uncle Silas should have been cold in his grave. "This is impossible," he whispered. "The impossible seems to be our specialty," Hattie said with a smile that revealed teeth too perfect and too white. "Now, about those marriage vows." But before she could finish, Boone noticed something that made his stomach drop. Fresh graves. 3 of them. Behind the cabin, under the old oak tree where Uncle Silas used to sit and whittle. The dirt was still dark with recent digging. Boone's eyes fixed on those fresh graves, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Who's buried there?" "Previous suitors," Cora answered matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "Uncle Silas tried to find us husbands before. None of them worked out." "Worked out?" Boone's voice cracked. "What happened to them?" Bertie stepped closer, her massive form blocking out the sun. "They couldn't handle the conditions of the will. Some ran away in the middle of the night. Others," she gestured toward the graves. "Others got sick and died waiting." "Sick from what?" "Fear, mostly," Hattie said, examining her fingernails with casual indifference. "It's amazing how quickly a man can waste away when he's terrified." Boone took a step backward, his hand instinctively moving toward his horse's reins. "But don't even think about leaving," she said. "You haven't heard the best part yet." Her smile widened, revealing those unnaturally perfect teeth. "The will states that if you refuse our proposal, or if you try to leave before making your decision, the entire inheritance goes to us. Every acre, every building, every cent." "That's not legal," Boone protested. "It is when the local judge is your cousin," Hattie said sweetly. "Judge Morrison signed off on everything. We made sure of that." Boone's mind raced. His uncle had never mentioned any cousins, especially not judges. But then again, Uncle Silas had never mentioned 3 giant women living on his property either. "How long have you been here?" "Long enough to know this land better than anyone," Bertie answered. "Long enough to know its secrets. Long enough to know why Uncle Silas really needed someone like you." "What secrets?" Cora folded the will carefully and tucked it back into her dress. "Marry us first. Then we'll show you what's really buried on this land." Her eyes glinted with something between amusement and hunger. "Trust me, those 3 graves are just the beginning." The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of recently turned earth, and something else, something sweet and cloying that made Boone's stomach turn. He looked back at his horse, then at the endless prairie stretching behind him, then at the 3 towering women who blocked his path to the cabin. "What if I say no?" he asked. "You won't," Cora said with absolute certainty. "Because we know about the bounty on your head back east. We know about the real reason your farm burned. And we know that staying here is your only chance at staying alive." Boone felt his knees go weak. "Nobody knew about that. Nobody could possibly know about that. Boone's hands clenched into fists. You're lying. Nobody knows about that. Sheriff Bradley's son didn't die in that barn fire by accident. Did he? Hattie asked softly. You were there. You saw who really set those flames. The blood drained from Boone's face. He'd never told another soul about that night. About watching the sheriff's own deputy light that match. About the boy trapped inside, screaming. About how Boone had tried to save him but arrived too late. The deputy blamed you, Cora continued, her voice matter-of-fact. Told everyone you started the fire to cover your gambling debts. Put a $1,000 bounty on your head, dead or alive. How could you possibly know this? Bertie walked to the porch and sat down heavily, the wooden steps groaning under her weight. Uncle Silas had friends, people who owed him favors, people who sent him information about anything that might affect his property. His property? You, Hattie said simply. He'd been watching you for years, Boone. Ever since your father died. Ever since you started making those bad choices that led to worse ones. Boone felt dizzy. His father had mentioned Uncle Silas maybe twice in his entire life. They'd barely been in contact. That's impossible. We hardly knew each other. Blood is thicker than water, Cora said, standing up to her full, intimidating height. And Uncle Silas never forgot family, even when family forgot him. She gestured toward the cabin. He built this place as a sanctuary, a place where people like you could disappear and start over. People like me? Desperate men with nowhere else to run, Bertie answered. Men who needed protection and were willing to work for it. Work doing what? The sisters exchanged another one of those loaded glances. Finally, Hattie spoke. This land sits on the largest silver deposit in 3 territories. Uncle Silas discovered it 15 years ago, but couldn't mine it alone. He needed people he could trust. People who had as much to lose as he did. Boone's head spun. Silver? His uncle had lived like a hermit, barely scraping by. If there's silver here, why was he so poor? Because he was hiding it, Cora explained. Mining silver draws attention, government attention, claim jumpers, killers. Better to look like a struggling farmer while slowly extracting wealth. The previous suitors, Boone realized. Boone, his voice barely a whisper. They weren't just husbands. They were miners. Very good, Bertie said with approval. And when they got greedy, when they started making plans to take the silver and run, she didn't need to finish. Boone's eyes drifted back to those 3 fresh graves. So what's to stop me from doing the same thing? Cora smiled. But there was nothing warm about it. Because, dear Boone, you're not getting married to gain access to the silver. Her smile widened. You're getting married to stay alive long enough to mine it. The words hit Boone like a physical blow. What do you mean, stay alive? The bounty hunters found the last 3 men, Hattie explained, picking at a loose thread on her wedding dress. Uncle Silas tried to protect them, but men talk when they drink. Men brag about silver when they think they're safe. And dead men don't talk at all, Cora added coldly. Boone looked around the isolated farmstead with new eyes. The high wooden fence surrounding the property wasn't decorative. It was defensive. The clear sightlines across the prairie weren't accidental. They were strategic. This isn't a farm. It's a fortress. Very good, Bertie said, clapping her massive hands together. Uncle Silas chose this location carefully. You can see riders coming from any direction. The nearest town is 2 days hard riding. And the silver mine entrance is hidden in the root cellar beneath the cabin. Show me. After the wedding, Cora said firmly. Those are the rules. Marriage first, then full partnership. Trust has to be earned. Trust? Boone laughed bitterly. You've been lying to me since I arrived. The will, the graves, everything. We haven't lied about anything important, Hattie protested. The will is real. The silver is real. The danger is real. Then why the elaborate wedding charade? Why not just offer me a partnership? The sisters went silent. For the first time since he'd arrived, they looked uncomfortable. Finally, Bertie spoke. Because the will specifies marriage. Uncle Silas was very particular about that. Why? Another long silence. Then Cora sighed, the sound like wind through a canyon. Because married couples can't be forced to testify against each other in court. If you're caught mining silver illegally, if the government comes asking questions, if bounty hunters drag you before a judge, wives can't be compelled to give evidence against their husbands, Hattie finished. The legal protection, of course. Uncle Silas had thought of everything. But why all 3 of you? Why not just one wife? Because? Bertie said softly. One wife might betray you for money. One wife might fall in love with someone else. One wife might die and leave you vulnerable. She stood up, towering over him. But 3 wives? 3 sisters who've protected this place for years? 3 women who have as much to lose as you do? That's different, Cora concluded. That's a family. Boone stared up at them, these 3 giant women in their wedding dresses, and realized they were right. It was protection. It was partnership. It was survival wrapped in white lace and legal ceremony. But as he opened his mouth to give his answer, a distant sound made them all freeze. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders coming fast across the prairie. They found you, Hattie whispered. If this story is touching you in any way, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with someone who loves a good Western tale, and subscribe to the Western Redemption channel. Every single day at exactly 10 a.m., a brand new story drops, packed with emotion, justice, and redemption. So turn on the notification bell and don't miss the next chapter, because out here in the West, no one waits around. The hoofbeats grew louder, and Boone could make out 4 riders cresting the distant hill. Even from half a mile away, he could see the glint of metal, badges or weapons, maybe both. Get inside, Cora commanded, but Boone stood frozen, watching death approach at a gallop. I said get inside. She grabbed his arm with surprising gentleness despite her massive strength. They can't see you here. It's too late, Boone said, his voice hollow. They're already too close. Hattie peered across the prairie, shading her eyes with her hand. Those aren't bounty hunters, she said slowly. That's Sheriff Morrison and his deputies. Your cousin? Boone asked Cora. My cousin, she confirmed, but her tone carried no relief. Which might be worse. He knows about the silver. Bertie stood up quickly, her wedding dress rustling like autumn leaves. He's been pressuring us to sell ever since Uncle Silas died. Said we couldn't manage a mining operation alone. Can we? Boone asked. We've been managing it just fine for 3 months, Cora snapped. But the law says single women can't file mining claims. We need a husband's name on the papers. The riders were close enough now that Boone could hear their voices carrying across the wind. Rough voices. The kind that belonged to men who'd made violence their profession. What if I marry you right now? Boone asked suddenly. Right here before they arrive? With what preacher? Hattie asked. I can perform marriages, Bertie said quietly. Uncle Silas taught me. It's legal as long as there are witnesses. Cora stared at her youngest sister in amazement. You never told us that. You never asked. Bertie's cheeks flushed pink beneath her veil. I've been waiting for the right moment. The sheriff's voice boomed across the yard as the 4 riders approached the fence. Cora, Hattie, Bertie, you ladies come out here right now. Decision time, Cora said to Boone. Marry us and become our legal partner, or take your chances with Sheriff Morrison's justice. Boone looked at the approaching riders, then at the 3 towering women who'd become his only hope for survival. What exactly would the marriage ceremony involve? You say yes, we say yes. I pronounce you married to all 3 of us, Bertie explained quickly. Simple and binding. And afterward? Afterward, you're our husband and legal co-owner of the richest silver mine in 3 territories, Hattie said. The riders were at the fence now, dismounting with the practiced efficiency of men accustomed to making arrests. Sheriff Morrison was a large man, but even he looked intimidated by the 3 towering sisters. Also, Cora added with a grim smile, afterward we protect you. And trust me, very few people are stupid enough to threaten the husbands of the Lane sisters. Boone could hear boots hitting the ground, spurs jingling, the metallic click of gun belts being adjusted. In 30 seconds, those men would be at the cabin. Ladies! Sheriff Morrison's voice carried authority and barely concealed anger. I know you're in there. We need to talk. Boone closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made the most important decision of his life. Yes, Boone said firmly. I'll marry all 3 of you. Bertie didn't hesitate. Do you, Boone Carter, take Cora, Hattie, and Bertie Lane as your lawful wives, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for better or worse? I do. Do you, Cora Lane, take Boone Carter as your lawful husband? I do, Cora said, grabbing Boone's left hand in both of hers. Do you, Hattie Lane, take Boone Carter as your lawful husband? I do, Hattie said, taking his right hand. Do you, Bertie Lane, take Boone Carter as your lawful husband? I do, Bertie whispered, placing her massive hand over their joined ones. By the authority vested in me by the territorial government, I pronounce you husband and wives. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The entire ceremony had taken less than a minute. Boone barely had time to process what had happened before Sheriff Morrison's heavy footsteps echoed on the wooden porch. "Open this door right now," the sheriff demanded, pounding on the cabin wall with his fist. Cora walked to the door and opened it calmly. "Good afternoon, Cousin Harold. What brings you all the way out here?" Sheriff Morrison was a broad-shouldered man with a thick mustache and eyes that missed nothing. Behind him stood 3 deputies, all armed and looking nervous about facing the giant sisters. "We're looking for a fugitive," Morrison said, trying to peer around Cora's massive frame. "Boone Carter, wanted for arson and murder back east. Someone reported seeing him heading this way." "Never heard of him," Cora lied smoothly. "Don't play games with me, Cora. We know he's here. His horse is right there in your corral." "That's my husband's horse," Hattie said, stepping beside her sister. "We just got married." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Married? To who?" Boone stepped forward, still dazed by the rapid turn of events. "To me, Sheriff. Boone Carter. But I'm not the man you're looking for." The sheriff's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but stopped when he saw all 3 sisters step protectively in front of their new husband. "You're under arrest for murder and arson in the state of Kansas." "I'm afraid that's impossible," Bertie said sweetly. "My husband hasn't left this property in over a month. We have witnesses who can testify to that." "What witnesses?" "Each other," Cora said. "And as his wives, we're legally permitted to give testimony on his behalf." Morrison's face darkened. "You can't harbor a fugitive even if you marry him." "We're not harboring anyone," Hattie said firmly. "We're protecting our husband from false accusations. Unless you have a warrant for his arrest, I suggest you leave our property." The sheriff looked from the 3 towering women to their new husband, clearly calculating his odds. 4 against 1 were bad enough, but 4 against 1 when 3 of the 4 stood nearly 7 feet tall with powerful athletic builds. "This isn't over," Morrison growled, but he was already backing toward his horse. The sheriff and his deputies rode away in a cloud of dust and muttered curses. But Boone knew Morrison's threat wasn't idle. They had hours, maybe a day, before he returned with reinforcements or a warrant. "Show me the mine," Boone said as soon as the riders disappeared over the hill. Cora led him to the cabin's root cellar, where she moved aside several sacks of potatoes to reveal a wooden trapdoor. Below was a ladder descending into darkness, but the tunnel beyond was well constructed with timber supports and oil lamps every few yards. "Uncle Silas was a mining engineer before he came west," Hattie explained as they descended. "He knew how to do this properly." The main shaft stretched back nearly 200 feet into the hillside, with smaller passages branching off at regular intervals. The walls glittered with veins of silver ore, more wealth than Boone had ever imagined in one place. "How much have you extracted?" he asked. 300 pounds since Uncle Silas died," Bertie answered. "We've been careful not to take too much too fast. Don't want to flood the local market. Where do you sell it?" "There's a buyer in Denver who asks no questions," Cora said. "Pays fair prices and keeps his mouth shut. Uncle Silas established the relationship years ago." They spent the next hour exploring the tunnels, and Boone began to understand the scope of the operation. This wasn't some small-time claim. It was a professional mining enterprise that could support a family for generations. "The previous husbands?" Boone asked as they climbed back to the surface. "What really happened to them?" The sisters exchanged looks. Finally, Hattie spoke. "The first one tried to steal silver and run off to California. We caught him loading his saddlebags in the middle of the night. The second one started talking too much in town, bragging about his rich wives," Cora continued. "Word got back to some unsavory people who decided to pay us a visit. And the third? Got greedy and careless," Bertie said sadly. "Tried to expand the operation too fast, attracted attention from claim jumpers. There was a fight. They're really buried out there." "Of course they are," Cora said. "We're not monsters, Boone. We gave them proper funerals, but we also learned from each mistake." As they emerged from the mine, Boone noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh rider tracks in the dirt, different from the sheriff's horses. These tracks were recent, made while they were underground. "We had visitors," he said quietly. All 3 sisters went rigid, their eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, Boone could see smoke rising from behind the hill where the sheriff had disappeared. "That's not a campfire," Hattie whispered. "That's a house burning," Cora said grimly. "Morrison's spreading the word, telling everyone we're harboring a fugitive." Bertie gripped Boone's arm. They're going to come back with a mob. The sun was setting, painting the prairie blood red. Soon it would be dark, and darkness favored attackers over defenders. The mob never came. Instead, as dawn broke over the prairie, a single rider approached the cabin. Not Sheriff Morrison, but a well-dressed man in a black suit carrying a leather satchel. "That's Judge Richardson from the territorial capital," Cora said, watching from the window. "Morrison's boss." The judge dismounted slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. He was older than Morrison, with gray hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he called out formally. "I believe we need to discuss recent events." Boone stepped outside with his 3 wives flanking him. Even in daylight, the sight of the towering sisters in their wedding dresses was intimidating. "Judge Richardson," Cora said respectfully, "what brings you to our property?" "Sheriff Morrison sent word about harboring fugitives and illegal mining operations," the judge said. "However, upon reviewing the evidence, I find his claims questionable." He opened his satchel and pulled out several documents. "It seems the murder warrant for Mr. Carter was issued based on false testimony. The real killer confessed 3 days ago. Furthermore, your mining claim is perfectly legal, filed properly under your husband's name as of yesterday." Boone stared at the papers. "How is that possible? Your uncle was a thorough man, Mr. Carter. He established legal relationships throughout the territory, people who owed him favors, people who respected his integrity." The judge smiled slightly. "People who were willing to ensure his family received proper protection." "Morrison won't like this," Hattie said. "Sheriff Morrison is no longer your concern," Judge Richardson replied. "He's been relieved of duty pending investigation into several questionable arrests and missing evidence. It seems he was planning to claim your mine for himself." The judge handed Boone the documents. "Your marriage is legal. Your mining claim is valid. And as of this morning, there are no warrants for your arrest anywhere in 3 territories." Bertie clasped her hands together. "Uncle Silas planned all of this? Your uncle spent 15 years building a network of allies," the judge explained. "Judges, lawyers, businessmen who valued his discretion and honesty. When he died, we all received letters explaining the situation and requesting our assistance. Even after death, he was protecting us," Cora whispered. As the judge rode away, Boone looked at his 3 giant wives and realized Uncle Silas had given him something more valuable than silver. He'd given him a family that would fight for him, protect him, and stand by him no matter what came. "So what happens now?" Boone asked. "Now we get back to work," Cora said with a grin. "This silver won't mine itself. And tonight," Hattie added with a blush, "we have a proper wedding celebration." Boone Carter had come west looking for a new start. Instead, he'd found 3 wives, a fortune in silver, and a future he never could have imagined. Sometimes the impossible turned out to be exactly what a man needed. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable Western tale, where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.